There's a queen of porcelain, metal, and flesh who believes that your free will is a disease, and she has the cure. Her name is Elesh Norn, and she doesn't just want to destroy the multiverse, she wants to perfect it. And she will do so by turning every living being into a part of her biomechanical hive mind. We've already talked about the Eldrazi feasting on entire worlds, but Elesh Norn is doing something much more terrifying. She's replacing life itself with nightmarish metal and oil. Let's see how this mother of machines rose to become the greatest threat the multiverse has ever seen, and the one gaping flaw in her big plan that finally toppled her perfect empire. What is Elesh Norn? I can pretty much say a bunch of things here, like she's the mother of machines or the grand creator, but that doesn't really give you the context for how she fits into the grander Magic the Gathering cosmos, I think. So, to truly understand Elesh Norn, her rise to power, and how she nearly conquered the entire multiverse pretty much by herself, we first need to understand the nightmarish race that she originally emerged from. Enter the Phyrexians. They are these violent living machines built from muscle, iron, and no love whatsoever. A mechanism of flesh and metal that haunts your nightmares, and even worse, they can possess powerful figures and even planeswalkers, who are pretty close to like godly beings in Magic, turning them into dastardly cyborgs who conform to the big hive mind itself. In other words, these things are freaky and disturbing in just about every single way that you can think of. Magic the Gathering as a whole covers a lot of different genres and tropes, but when it comes to archetype villains in Magic, nobody does it better than the biomechanical horror that is the Phyrexians. They're kinda like the Borg from Star Trek or the Reapers from Mass Effect, but kind of turned the spooky up to a billion. It's absolutely no doubt that the Phyrexians are one of the most infamous forces that Wizards of the Coast has ever created in their lore. They are a race of biomechanical zealots who believe that all life must be completed, because in Phyrexian eyes, flesh is weak and individualism is, well, to put it lightly, strongly overrated. In their dogma, conformity is key because free will is just a big flaw waiting to be corrected. Now, in order to accomplish this happy message, they dominate entire universes, stripping away the soul from, well, pretty much everything there is. They replace bone with metal and blood with oil, and transform living beings into servants of a grand machine religion throughout a process that's known as completion. So in a way, they're just as much an ideology as they are like an actual species in the Magic universe. And standing at the top of that ideology was Elesh Norn. But you might already know that she was not the original leader or founder. Way back when, in the original run of the Phyrexians, Yawgmoth, the Thran physician himself, was actually the top dog. But he was slain, and eventually a being known as Karn came into existence. And he was actually created as a weapon to destroy Yawgmoth, a living machine built by the master artificer Urza, using the heart of a Phyrexian. And this being, Karn, eventually created his very own plane known as Argentum, but slowly through some evil shenanigans, it became Mirrodin. Now, its key feature is the 5 suns representing the 5 mana colors of Magic the Gathering, under which the machines and people lived in harmony. But eventually, that oily, broken Phyrexian heart that was at his core started leaking into the very essence of the plane, corrupting it and creating new Phyrexia. As such, Karn became the father of machines, a second Yawgmoth, but was eventually liberated and freed of this control. However, at the same time, in his place rose the 5 Creators, one for each of the 5 mana colors. And this is where Elesh Norn finally enters the scene. She was the Creator, aka the key leader of the white-aligned machine orthodoxy, which then very swiftly became the dominant faction of New Phyrexia, and eventually its unquestioned ruler. With time, she actually became just as much of a god as Karn, and for good reason. I mean, look at her. Elesh Norn is undoubtedly one of the most unforgettable villains Magic has ever produced. Towering, thick, and thin, almost like skeletal in silhouette, and she looked like a statue that kind of had learned how to walk. Her body fused white porcelain, metal, and this raw but oddly beautiful red flesh. I'd say it's fair to say she's literally elegance and gore's silly little love child in a weird way. But I think what really gets me going, what really freaks me out is her face. It has no eyes, or at the very least they're hidden behind this huge visor with her mouth being lined with these needle-like sharp teeth. Wholly horrifying and dominant. Because Elesh Norn understood something that many tyrants do. First, you must stunt on them, and then you dominate them. In a weird way, she's, white mana, somehow pure, despite the absolute insanity at her core. Like, literally, homegirl is nuts, you just wait. But I think it all stems from her twisted views on the mana that she actually represents. As you might know in Magic, white mana traditionally represents peace, structure, law, unity, community, and protection. It's kind of the color of armies that defend civilizations, healers who preserve life, and societies built on shared purpose. Gideon Jura, Johnny Goldmane, and Elspeth Tyrell are phenomenal examples of all these different concepts that this color of mana represents, and I've made videos on all of these, by the way, but every color in Magic has what I like to call another side. Pretty clever, right? Totally came up with that idea myself. It's kind of like the first side, but a little bit different, a little bit twisted. Elesh Norn, as a matter of fact, is maybe the greatest example of what actually happens when the noble ideals of white mana become corrupted obsessions. Order? Nah, the easiest way to do that is control. Unity? Well, that's pretty much conformity, right? And what better way to have faith and peace than becoming the divine goddess at the center of your race's hive mind? I would say none. So in pretty much every single way, she just is white mana's meaning incarnate, just in the worst possible way. As is the pattern with all big baddies, Elesh Norn did not see herself as being evil. She actually believed that she was saving existence itself through a messed up, and I mean messed up, lens. So how did she actually do it, and what went wrong? Elesh Norn incoming! As I've already teased before, Elesh Norn did not simply appear at the top of New Phyrexia, no. With those cool claws of hers, she climbed to the very top of New Phyrexia, but it's important because her origins are actually directly tied to the key mana sources of Mirrodin, the 5 suns. White, blue, black, red, and green each radiated influence across this world. And as the corruption of the plane deepened, each color gave rise to its own monstrous champion. And the white sun manifested our queen, Elesh Norn. Even from the beginning of her existence, Norn stood apart amongst her other fellow creators. Where many of them embraced raw brutality, predation, experimentation, or ambition, she built a home for those of her cohort. She actually adopted recognizable elements from human and elvish cultures, shaping herself and her white mana faction with ceremony, architecture, symbolism, and hierarchy. That's because she understood something that many of the other creators didn't, that power is stronger with faith, trust, and Elesh Norn does. And that's what truly let her stand apart from the rest of the 4 other creators. The blue creator, Jin-Gitaxias, dissected minds, and the black mana, Shieldred, schemed in darkness, looking for a claim to fame. The green-aligned Vorinclex embodied a savage natural dominance, and the red mana, Urabrask, rejected everything due to his fiery independence. And our girl understood that they needed to be one. All will be one, and so Elesh Norn constructed society's classic means of best control, a religion. Her white-aligned machine orthodoxy believed that Phyrexia must follow the teachings of the father of the machines, Karn. Truth and power above all else led to enlightenment, and if someone resisted enlightenment, that was all good. No worries, because enlightenment, it turns out, can be forced. In other words, super easy, barely an inconvenience. Divine Purpose was the name of the game, and it was the rule now. And she pulled that off so effectively, some actually saw her as half delusional, lost inside her own cemetery, like me, but a little bit taller. But they got it all twisted, because despite having no eyeballs, turns out that Norn wasn't blind. She was calculating, probably with her big old machine brain. Her desire to form a religion was objectively the correct path to absolute power. She'd actually been doing this from way before Karn ever left. As Karn's core sat in the depths of the world as father of the machines, Norn maneuvered around him. She even sought to bring Karn upward, supposedly to protect him from Jin-Gitaxias and his meddling dog as well, because in Norn's point of view, Karn, willingly or not, was legitimacy. If the symbolic father stood beside her, then her rule was guaranteed and justified. But the true turning point here came during the final conquest of Mirrodin, the moment that it truly became New Phyrexia. You see, the people of Mirrodin, the Mirren, were actually pretty strong. But amongst them, the strongest was an angel named Atraxa. You might have seen Atraxa. She does a lot. She draws you a bunch of cards, and she also gains you a bunch of life. This angel fought fiercely, refusing to break under Phyrexia's assault. And Elesh Norn saw that resistance and, in a very twisted admiration, decided to reward it. And with the combined efforts of most the other creators, led by Norn, they then managed to complete Atraxa. Now, I can't lie, I think that this is one of the standout moments in Norn's entire story, because it was the moment that I personally realized just how insane she was, but also how very clever. She used a martyr to both unify the creators and create an insanely powerful co-council in the form of Atraxa, all as a mockery basically of Mirrodin's failed attempts at freedom. Norn wanted a symbol of unity, something that New Phyrexia itself had lacked so far. The creators were rivals pretending to share a cause, so she invited the others to contribute to Atraxa's creation. Blue, black, green, and white influences shaped this angel into something new. As you probably have realized, only Eurobrask refused, realizing what Norn's goal actually was here. He and his Red Mana faction were way too independent to contribute to this one, especially for her gain, and as a result, Atraxa became the creator's voice, a living project representing the corporation and unity of the four other mana factions. But Atraxa also represented something else, something way bigger. Elesh Norn's new power. She was learning to win without open war, but now just imagine what she might be able to do with war. Well, win. The answer is win. To become the Grand Creator, she overwhelmed the forces of Shieldred and Urabrask, bringing rival spheres under her influence. She manipulated Vorinclex, and reluctantly, Jin-Gitaxias aligned with her grander vision as well. Funnily enough, Urabrask remained the one key exception. His red-aligned philosophy valued autonomy far more than Norn ever could tolerate. His forces just kept causing problems, but never big enough to really purge or anything crazy. And by the end of her steep rise upwards, she was no longer just a creator, she had now become the mother of machines, and it was time for her to bolster her forces so that she could fulfill all Phyrexian's true purpose, conquering reality itself. Elesh Norn's greatest nightmare. At this point, Norn was pretty much unstoppable. Or so I thought, and you did probably too. Honestly, pretty much everyone did, until her true weakness was revealed by a very, very unlikely figure. This was actually revealed in the story A Garden of Flesh, which is a gnarly name, and please read it for yourself after this video because it's something else, that's all I'm gonna say. For now, it's just important to know that it takes place right about now in Norn's timeline, but it goes to show us her true weakness: fear. Elesh Norn was standing before a great gathering of Phyrexians overseeing the completion of a Mirren woman, classic Tuesday night on Old New P, and this should have been routine otherwise. Another enemy broken, another soul saved and remade, let's go make some donuts. But for some reason, the process begins to fail in some really grotesque ways. Flesh mutates strangely, organic weeds and flowers begin to grow and bloom, blood and plant matter twist together in ways that are chaotic as hell, the sacred machinery of perfection tainted and wrong. Quite frankly, for Elesh Norn, this was blasphemy. But then she realizes that something impossible is happening. Nothing went wrong. This was a nightmare. Someone had stormed into her home and waged literal psychological warfare against her. Who in their right minds would dare to do that? Well, the name of that very base being is Ashiok, a planeswalker who feeds on fear, dreams, and nightmares. Ashiok is really weird. They're a phantom nothingness who treats the minds of others like moldable clay. Ashiok had honestly simply come to New Phyrexia out of curiosity and discovered something very fascinating for them. Phyrexians can dream, and that also meant Phyrexians can fear. Which honestly is kind of massive, all things considered, because, New Phyrexia presented itself as beyond weakness, beyond doubt, beyond mere mortality. Fear, dreams, none of that was supposed to be here. Emotions were considered weak, they were to be cold. Ashiok proved that they were still absolutely vulnerable where it matters the most, inside their minds. Something that Norn actually should have realized did apply to her, since she'd been manipulating the other creators this entire time herself. And then Ashiok actually delivers the killing blow by conjuring a vision of Elspeth Tyrell wearing Elesh Norn's own armor. For some context here, Elspeth was a thorn in New Phyrexia's side, freeing Karn from their grasp, waging war against them on the side of Mirrodin, and she did all of that so selflessly. Elspeth was pretty much Norn's total opposite, a white mana planeswalker hell-bent on order, salvation, and purity. Two sides of the same coin. You get it? Same but different. So Norn reached a conclusion. Someone kill that thing with fire ASAP. So Elspeth wants to be alive? No. Kill her, get rid of her. Easy peasy, no fear anymore, as long as someone please make her die. Which meant just one thing: it was time for war. And before War on Phyrexia comes a lot of hype. Speaking of which, if you're watching this video on your phone, could you check out the hype feature? Just scroll to the right on the like or dislike button and you'll see a hype button there. It's free and easy and supports the channel, but really I just want to kind of see how it works, and if it does anything, maybe it'll actually help and we'll get a bunch of new viewers so I can make even more MTG content for you in the future. Let's see. Elesh Norn's Multiversal Conquest. Now, let me tell you something. Conquering the entire multiverse might seem easy because a bunch of people have tried to do so in Magic the Gathering in the past, but it actually is, a little bit harder than you might think initially. Outside of literal planeswalkers who are super rare and super special, moving between the planes is pretty much nearly impossible. Back during the old days, Yawgmoth had a very clever and specific way for the Phyrexians of doing so that was right now off the table, so Norn needed a way to maneuver around the planes to, claim all of them. And to do that, she worked with a really bad guy named Tezzeret, who had put a very powerful artifact known as the Planar Bridge into his own chest. Now this thing was a really big deal in the last multiverse invasion, and there was a little quid pro quo tit for tat involved here because Tezzy needed a Phyrexian body to not, die using the bridge, and Norn needed the bridge and an item known as the Reality Chip. Really cool card, lets you cast stuff from the top of your library if it's attached to a creature. Pretty cool. I use it a bunch in Modern. But yeah, Tessie had that, and she needed that to lay waste to her enemies with. So they made a little trade, which allowed Phyrexia to conduct experiments across different worlds. The most important of which were the Green Creator Vorinclex infiltrating Kaldheim to gain access to the World Tree, and the Blue Mana Creator Jin-Gitaxias advancing horrifying research on Kamigawa to complete Planeswalkers. And once that was all taken care of, they could really get the party started. Shieldred, the Black Mana Spider Mommy Creator, was sent to Dominaria to retrieve Karn, the symbolic father of machines, but Karn himself was only really part of the price here because once Pops had come home, Norn unveiled the true centerpiece of her new conquest, Realmbreaker. This thing was a twisted imitation of Kaldheim's World Tree, grown not to sustain worlds, but to pierce them. Realmbreaker's roots and branches would connect New Phyrexia to countless planes at the same time, allowing armies of metal and oil to flood reality itself. And dare I say, that is metal as hell. But all the Planeswalker heroes caught wind of this plan, and they tried to stop her using a bowl. It makes sense, don't worry about it. Essentially, a strike team of Planeswalkers attempted one final desperate mission to stop all of this. They infiltrated New Phyrexia carrying a copy of the Golgothian Silex, a very powerful weapon that Urza had used to debilitate the original Phyrexian invasion, and these Planeswalkers now hope to destroy Realmbreaker before its activation. But timing's a bitch, and they arrived like literally seconds too late. The tree had already connected to dozens of other planes, and detonating this weapon now might have actually destroyed not only Phyrexia, but also all of the worlds already linked to it. Then, Norn appeared with a completed Nissa Ravane, shattered the mission, and the Phyrexian invasion of the multiverse truly began. And in those opening moments, we see exactly who Norn truly was. Shieldred here actually tried to cause a little bit of a quick uprising right after the invasion started. Nice try. So Elesh Norn slaughtered her using her newest Pokemon, completed a Johnny Goldmane. And then she dispatched her other corrupted Planeswalkers outward like living missiles. Nahiri, Luca, Tamio, and Ajani were all sent to conquer worlds meaningful to them specifically. Norn actually realized that the easiest way to destroy them was to have the heroes of these planes overthrow them themselves, which is kind of messed up. But the mission that she actually cared about the most went to her original bestie, her voice, Atraxa. Atraxa was sent to the plane of New Capenna to destroy a location known as the Halo Wellspring. In case you don't know, Halo was really strong and like Phyrexian kryptonite basically, but also New Capenna was home to one other big threat, Elspeth Tyrell. Despite everything, paranoia had now fully taken root with her. Norn still feared Elspeth maybe more than anything and anyone else. And as war raged across countless worlds, a final resistance struck once again. Another task force invaded New Phyrexia itself again. Pyromancer Chandra Nalar, Dryad and woman who fuses with trees for a hobby, Ren, and Geomancer, native of Mirrodin, Koth, invaded the plane, helped by the Rebel Creator, Red Mana, Urabrask. Yeah, that's kind of a big twist, right? That guy really is like the ultimate FU to Norn, honestly, and I kind of respect him for that. It kind of makes him my favorite creator. And this time, once again, they got real close, but their efforts were futile anyways. Nissa and Jin-Gitaxias beat them to it, Norn prepared to complete all of them, and then in the 11th hour, from the top ropes of the multiverse itself, the heavens shatter to reveal the one being that Norn had feared the most, Elspeth Tyrell, who was now an archangel. My girl here had shattered the plane boundary itself, appearing from the place between the planes, the blind eternities, and for the mother of machines, this was quite literally a nightmare made real. The one figure that Ashiok had once used to torment her now stood in front of her in blazing truth, and she had really big wings now as well. And their confrontation was more than just physical. Elspeth told Norn that Phyrexia's ideals of unity might have held meaning at one point in time, but Norn had corrupted them through her own ego. This crusade was no longer for Phyrexia, it was for herself, which, to be honest, totally was the case. And Norn threw the kitchen sink at her, but Elspeth was of course just a distraction. Ren, the Dryad and resident tree person, enacted the true plan while she was distracted. She fused with Realmbreaker itself, reaching across the multiverse through its branches in search of the lost plane of Zhalfir. Now this is another place with a deep tie to the original Phyrexian invasion that had been displaced from time by this guy here, Teferi. Mirren rebels formed a desperate barrier to protect Ren, buying some precious seconds, while Phyrexian forces tried hammering on the walls. But Norn wasn't satisfied. She would never be satisfied. She seized Elspeth and hurled her through the defenses, shattering them entirely. Phyrexian armies surged forward to slaughter the rebels, but Ren and Realmbreaker had already become one. How ironic. A portal tore open, and from it came Teferi, the Time Mage, and the armies of Zhalfir, charging directly into the heart of New Phyrexia. Norn was unraveling as the world built in her image was literally being torn apart. And that's when Jin-Gitaxias finally made his big move. Yeah, they're all scheming. Disgusted by Norn's selfish rule, he turned his blue-aligned forces against her. You can't make this stuff up. In the middle of a literal apocalypse, her own empire just began cannibalizing itself. Now, credit where credit is due. Even then, Norn was an absolute tank. She slaughtered waves and waves of attackers as her body was torn asunder. The once divine mother of machines had been reduced to a crawling wreck, stripped of armor, stripped of legs, dragging herself towards escape. But there was no escape. The only thing left for her was punishment. Daddy was home, and he was angry. Karn was up and moving again, and he ripped her head off in one of the sickest pieces of art that I have ever seen. Ironically, the father of machines who had created this plane that she had worshipped so much was her own undoing, and there is somewhere something very poetic about that. And if you're now curious and want to learn more about my man Karn and how all of this even came to be, how he created a plane, how it became a literal god, check out this video right here where I go into Karn's story and how he created all of this mess to begin with. Otherwise, thanks for watching, really appreciate it, and I will hopefully see you in the next video. If you haven't done it yet, press that hype button. Hype. Alright.